In this video, I want to go over beast empire symbolism. I've talked about the beast empires before and their attributes which are associated with the pantheon of the fallen angels, pointing out that the beast empires began with Egypt, then Assyria, then Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and now the British Empire, which includes the US and the Commonwealth nations and even Israel. See my video titled Jerusalem. And one way we can identify the beast empires is through their pagan, polytheist, Gnostic symbolism, which is carried forward throughout history, often hidden in plain sight. And these symbols can happen through paintings, mosaics, literature, music, movies, opera, plays, rituals, fashion, and even architecture. First, I want to show beast symbolism through a ritual. Someone shared these photos from the early 1900s of the Bohemian Grove, and the Bohemian Grove is a reproduction of a sacred grove or Hollywood as described in Sir James Fraser's book The Golden Bough. The sacred grove that was described in his grimoire was near Lake Nemi in a shrine to the goddess Diana, and I've covered that in previous videos. So here are the photos. As you can see, it's very druidic. And I'll just cycle through some of these. See here, right here, you see this curved staff? That's a wizard staff. Kings. Very druidic, or maybe these are supposed to represent knights, I'm not sure. Monk or a priest. That looks like a real person. Hanging probably in effigy. They're burying someone. He said he's born every minute, but he died August 8 of 1909 probably. That's the date on the photo. Here they have it all in some kind of a circle, which looks like some of the burial sites with the circular. And here they are in another death type ritual with a caped dude. So the next thing that I want to go over is this book that a friend sent me. It's called The Secret Language of Symbols, published in London in 1994. And this book seems like a Gnostic interpretation, but I want to review it, not because I'm Gnostic, but because I think that the concept of their symbolism is important to understand for the end times. So the first one that they show is the unicorn, or one of the first ones they show is a unicorn. And I wanted to just mention that the unicorn, the lion, and the dragon are on the Ishtar Gate in Babylon, and they're here. And they're the same animals that are on the Windsor heraldry. You have the lion, unicorn, and dragon. And I'd asked Gary Wayne about the symbolism of the unicorn as it related to the bull, because he'd mentioned that before, and here's what he said. He said, the unicorn is a horse that was ridden by the giants before the flood. In Greek mythology, gods were driven by white horses, but in older depictions they gave it a single horn. The unicorn is a counterfeit of the cherubim, angelic beings in the Bible around God's throne, which had the face of a man, lion, eagle, and bull. In the KJV, unicorn is translated from rem in Hebrew, which means bull, and this is apparently where the term bully came from, because the gods of the pantheon were known as tyrants or bullies. The horn also represents the third eye for special knowledge, and the unicorn represents a single horn on the Antichrist. So let's look at some more of this book here. It says that some symbols are universally potent and tend to remain constant, even often with a connection to power in antiquity. It says there are no more powerful symbols than the gods themselves. They're often accompanied by ritual magic, and prayer. It says, from Egypt to Rome, the migration of symbols exemplified by this first century painting of the Villa of the Mysteries in Pompeii, Italy, which shows the Egyptian goddess Isis and Nymphis flanking a sacred crocodile. And I've already talked about the fact that Egypt was the first beast empire. It says the organized export of religion and symbols began in earnest in the 4th century AD. This says the reverence for the Virgin Mary has pre-Christian origins in the cults of divine female divinities, such as Artemis and Diana, were prominent among pre-Christian Mediterranean people. In this 13th century painting, the crescent moon at the feet of Mary is a symbol borrowed from ancient Egypt, where it was an attribute of the goddess Isis, the queen of heaven. This one is an interesting painting. This is an ancient Greco-Roman painting of Europa, and Greco-Roman art would have been found frequently in the Hellenistic period, which began about 320 BC and ended with the conquest of the Greek Empire by the Romans at around 30 BC. So this is Europa with the bull, but this bull actually looks like a horse. It has a fishtail and 2 unicorn-looking horns. So there you see the crossover of the unicorn and the bull. But also look at the ship in the background. It has the Roman stylized eagle symbol. She also looks a bit masculine, especially in the face. The next one is Prometheus in Andromeda. Painting by a 17th century Dutch artist shows a Greek hero Perseus rescuing Andromeda, and that would have been long after the Greek Empire, but it's carried forward into the 1600s, you see. And they also say that the mystical view of the universe was reflected in forms of visual art and literature, but most spectacularly in the towering Gothic cathedrals, which represent sacred geometry, which is what we're going to look at next. Sacred geometry is one of the 7 sacred sciences we talk about frequently, which is used by the Freemasons and other secret societies who get their MO from the fallen angels. It says certain geometrical shapes have the power to reach deep into the unconscious and affect subtle changes in the mood or emotions of the observer, a property most apparent when applied by a skillful architect. And these are just some examples of sacred geometry they show in their book. Ankh, Rosicrucian cross. And this sacred geometry is also represented in the Cosmati pavement in Westminster Abbey, where they used tiles from ancient Rome and Egypt to create sacred geometry, which they say themselves represents earth, wind, fire, and water. And apparently this is the same placement as shaman use on their divination boards that represent the cosmos. Air, water, earth, and fire are elements of alchemy. So this is essentially a cosmogram, and cosmograms depict cosmology in flat, geometric form and are used for meditation and spiritual inspiration. So they use the tiles from ancient Rome and Egypt along with sacred geometry because they're a beast empire, a continuation of the Roman Empire and the Egyptian Empire. And the symbolism is always carried forward by their beast system under the Nephilim descendants because they're Nephilim worshippers. The next one I want to look at is the hourglass. And there's a lot in this book, but I'm only looking at certain things. Objects. The hourglass is a symbol of mortality and the passing of time. The hourglass also stands for the cyclical nature of existence because hourglasses have to be inverted repeatedly. and they represent the grace of the heavens falling upon the earth. And I wanted to cover that one because this here is somebody named Tyla, not familiar with her, at the Met Gala recently, the 2024, and her dress is made of sand, and she's holding an hourglass. See that? The Grail in the Round Table. Royalty, office, and consecration. And I'm going to read all of this. Many of the trappings of the office are highly symbolic, expressive variously of status, superior wisdom, access to secret power, wealth and riches, or temporal or spiritual authority. Such attributes help to maintain the mystique of those who hold high position and are constant reminders of the extent to which such people are set apart from lesser mortals. A potent symbol of office is the key, a mark of initiation. It's an attribute of the Pope and of the two-faced Roman god Janus, who held the key that both binds mankind to the gods and frees us from the lower self. The shepherd's crook, carried by Osiris and the Egyptian kings, also metaphorically by Christ, denotes leadership and protection. The flail, another attribute of Osiris, symbolizes judgment. It survives to this day in the form of the fly swatter carried by African tribal chiefs. So here you have the baptismal font, the throne, the coat of arms, the oil lamp, the orb carried by a monarch at coronation. The orb represents temporal power. The surmounting cross symbolizes or embodies spiritual authority. The ceremonial orb and scepter suggest dominion over female and male energies, which together symbolize the creative forces of the material world. The crown. Its circularity represents perfection in the infinite. Height indicates majesty. Masculine solar power. Silver crown for lunar feminine power. The Virgin Mary, or the Queen of Heaven, has a crown of stars. So, the royals are still using that same symbolism. They go into heraldic beasts, which I won't cover since I've done that a lot before in other videos. And this book goes into a lot of other symbols, and I'll put the link in the description box in case anyone is interested. There are some other examples of ancient Roman mosaics that I want to go over, where you see a lot of Greek and Roman pagan gods and creatures. And these that I'm going to go over also remind me of the ones that were in Pompeii, which was also in Rome. Around that same time, the Hellenistic period, and Pompeii was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius volcano in 70 AD, and there was so much erotic art there at Pompeii. Every perversion you could think of depicted on the walls and the floor and in the statues of that place. So that fits into our beast system attribute of sexual perversion. But they like to, a lot of times, depict the pagan gods like Zeus and Europa. And here this one is the head of Medusa coming out of a portal that looks like sacred geometry. And this one is from Rome from 115 AD. So now I want to talk about, oh, here's another one, the eye, Pan, Scorpion. The next one I want to talk about is movies category. So speaking of the Beast Empire Great Britain and symbolism in movies, I have another example of an actress that is Order of the British Empire, and they historically have, and still do, use specific actors and actresses and musicians to portray their polytheist history and agenda. And sometimes they're bloodliners, or they're bastards, and often they're educated at the Royal Academy, Oxford, and Cambridge, and I've given a lot of these examples in prior videos. So Emma Thompson is a British actress, and she is Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, which is the second highest order of the British Empire. and she was made that in 2018 by Queen Elizabeth II. It says here, Thomas has said of her religious views, "I'm an atheist. I regard religion with fear and suspicion. It's not enough to say that I don't believe in God. I actually regard the system as distressing. I'm offended by some of the things said in the Bible and the Quran, and I refute them." Says she's politically liberal and has been a campaigner since her youth. She was educated at Cambridge, which is the sister college of Oxford, like many of the others I review on this channel. And what movies and shows has she been in? Well, she was in I Am Legend, where she's the doctor that promoted the virus, which was originally supposed to kill cancer or cure cancer, but caused the zombie apocalypse. She was in 3 different Harry Potter movies. She was in a children's show titled The Magic Roundabout, another one titled Beautiful Creatures, which is a romantic gothic film where a boy falls in love with a witch. She was in The Crystal Cube, about a future society based on the caste system described in The Brave New World, where people are divided into alphas, betas, and gammas based on their genetic background. She was in Shakespeare, tons of plays and screen adaptations of Shakespeare, and we know that Shakespeare is just a retelling of the history of their pagan religion. So A Midsummer Night's Dream, King Lear, Much Ado About Nothing. She played Queen Elizabeth I, the Fairy Queen, in a BBC sitcom, and she played Queen Elizabeth II in Playhouse Presents. She's also been in American propaganda films, one of them called Primary Colors, which is about Bill and Hillary Clinton. She was in Junior, which was about a pregnant man with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So you get the idea. She's a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, the second highest order of the British Empire. Thanks for listening.